Greetings, welcome back to BarryTsGarage. I'm Barry, and I'm excited to begin a new little series in episodes related to a 1948 Buick. And it's a special car. It's not just, although any 1948 Buick would be rare today, there's not many of them out there. The car we're going to have a look at, talk about, and explore a little bit has a very unique story. So without any further delay, come on along. We'll see what we can learn. Okay, JB, this is a cool sight, this car. Let's just start at the top. What is this car?
In the first Woodie or wooden body car goes way back in the history of all car companies. Cars were originally made out of wood. A lot of people don't understand that. They evolved into using sheet metal. And then there was kind of a renaissance of interest in wooden cars. And so people that, for instance, had large estates, or they had hunting lodges or hotels that they had to pick up people at the train station. There weren't that many airports in those days, but they'd pick up the people that were coming to visit, and they needed something that was large and had a place for their luggage. So the estate wagon concept came into being, and a limited number of them were built by almost all of the factories. The factories really commissioned other companies to build them, much the same way they built the convertibles in the Zephyr family. There was really not enough production numbers at all to justify a Buick or Chevrolet or Ford or any of those major factories. So they went to people like Ionia and different smaller, they weren't small, companies that would take the basic format of the car and they would deliver what they called a car in white, which was factory code for, we just give them the basics, the floor pan, the front of the car, the engine, and give them the basic fundamental starting point. And then in this case, the Woodies or wooden cars that were built would be built at that particular factory, like Ionia or some of the other. There were a number of them. And so it wasn't necessary to have large numbers. So they could make as little as 20 cars, and since they were small companies, it was still profitable. Buick and Chevrolet and Ford took a different tack, but the General Motors family, the Chryslers, those cars all pretty much Hudson went to these small outfits and had them build wooden car versions of their standard production line.
Okay, so if they were kind of a custom bodied car then.
Very much so.
And
yeah.
So they were probably, I'm assuming, significantly more expensive to buy.
Very expensive and very time consuming. There's some wonderful stories that I've heard about Buick Wagons wherein, you got to remember, a lot of very well-known people bought these cars and used them. Famously, Clark Gable took a 40 Buick from Los Angeles. He picked it up at the Buick dealer and drove it to Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
And back by himself.
Huh.
So if you wanted to put yourself back in that period and try to understand what that involved, that was an enormous undertaking. Just the logistics of it, the roads were terrible. It was a long way, it was over 1,000 miles. So, you know, the idea that somebody would have the courage to do that is pretty amazing. And when he came back, people really were shocked to see that he'd gone that distance and come back safely, and the car made it. And one of the interviews that he did was wonderful, because they said, you know, how did you know the car would even make it that far on these horrible roads with no gas stations and no help and no mechanics? He looked at him and said, "It's a Buick."
And that was a car commercial all by itself, wasn't it?
And that was great. It would have been a great commercial,
yeah,
if they'd had the presence of mind to record it. But the point is that cars were much higher quality. They were simpler. They were, all the knots and details had been worked out pretty much by the late 40s, and the cars were very reliable. This car is incredibly reliable. It has very few options to fail you. There are, some things that are available on Buicks, road lights and some various things that you could, radios and some other appliances. But they were simple and straightforward, and they were thoroughly worked out and worked well. One of the things you notice when you sit in this car immediately is you hear the clock ticking.
Yeah.
And it's just this wonderful, when everything goes quiet, you can finally hear the wonderful sound of the clock in this car.
That's right. I'll admit, before we got ready to do this, I got inside, shut the door, and heard that. And that was just an amazing
it's a wonderful
experience, really.
It's a sound of precision equipment that is not around anymore. And
that clock is still ticking.
This was a production car, but it got
one thing. One thing we haven't actually mentioned is, what is this exact car as far as year, make, model? What is this car?
Okay, this is a 1948 Roadmaster, which would make it the top of the line in terms of motor, wheelbase, ride, the appurtenances that you could get with it.
Okay.
This was the very first production automatic transmission car too.
Oh.
So it's rare in a number of ways, but it's extra rare because the people that bought the car, a company or a small family in the East Coast, decided they wanted an automatic, and it was the first time it was offered. And of course, that same automatic transmission was used for a number of years, and it worked extremely well. It was worked out. If you recall, we talked about the earlier automatic transmissions that Buick came out with. This is 10 years later, after they introduced the automatic in production cars, and they had worked out the bugs and got the reliability of the engine. And this is the very first Dynaflow
okay, so
transmission.
this is a Dynaflow Buick Roadmaster Woodie Wagon.
Woodie Wagon, yeah. It's just,
okay, now,
it hits all the boxes.
Okay, and in addition to that, tell me the story of this particular one as far as production number and all that.
Yeah, they only built, I think, 200 or 300 of them. Again, they were very expensive, and so it put it out of the reach of a lot of people, so they really were not ever going to be popular. In addition to which, they had a long build time, and there's a wonderful story about, I actually spoke to a gentleman who worked at Buick and in that era, and he was telling us about a particular car that a Buick, I believe it was a Roadmaster Woodie, that had been commissioned to be built. His company was commissioned to do it, and he actually flew an airplane down to Georgia to pick up the wood, just to make the wood for that one car, so it would get to the factory and in the hands of the craftspeople just that much faster, because apparently there was a lot of pressure on it. I don't remember who the individual was that bought it, but it was a who's who of industrialists and actresses and people of some note that would buy a car like this. But that was the lengths to which they would go to get the cars, because they took so long to build in the first place, and to get the northern white ash that they're made out of. That was a lot of it was sourced down in the southeast of the United States.
Okay, another thing you mentioned to me off camera is about the seat covers and what they might represent.
Yeah, the old joke about a car's never been sat in.
Yeah.
This is the only car I know of that can say that, because when they prepared the car to go on the show circuit, Buick would take cars to the larger cities, New York, Chicago, St. Louis, and as an introductory feature, they would take them and have a specific show for the dealers and the people in that area. And this particular car was on a turntable in New York City at the New York Auto Show for this particular car in the General Motors line. It was up there rotating around, and the gentleman came to watch and just became mesmerized by the whole thing, and went over to the the salesman who was there, who was obviously there to take orders, if you were of a mind to order one, and the guy said, "I want to buy that car," and he was very intent on saying that car. He didn't say a car like this. And of course, the salesman explained to him that he could order one, that he could have one in a short time, and they'd get one built for him. And he said, "No, you're not listening. I want to buy that car."
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, sir, this car is going to go on tour. It's going to go to the bigger cities, and we're going to show it to a number of people. It's been prepared for that purpose." And one of the things that they did was they put seat covers over the original interior. Those seat covers, just for the show cars, is still on this car.
Wow.
So literally, the seats have never been sat on because they've
been covered up all this time.
All this time, and we're not about to take it off.
Okay. Now, let's talk, and we'll get into a lot of this different things deeper in other videos, but tell me about the engine under the hood.
Well, Buick started out with an overhead valve engine, which turned out to be the engine they're still using to this day. So it was a very modern approach, but they started out in the very early times when everybody else was using flatheads and that technology, and General Motors, to their credit, recognized that this had tremendous potential. So the overhead valve, I won't bore you with the mechanics of it, but it allowed for an expansion of the horsepower, the performance, and of course this Roadmaster has a much bigger, physically bigger engine than even the smaller series Buicks do.
Okay.
That necessitated having a bigger front end because the engine's literally longer than the other engines, which would be unheard of today. But so the Roadmasters and the Centuries had these big, long, very powerful overhead valve straight 8 engines, and of course in 42 they decided to even add another carburetor, so that of course increased the horsepower even more.
Wow.
So this is a 48 and it has the benefit of all that technology. It's a 320 cubic inch engine, which is a very large engine and has a lot of potential, and it needed it. This car
is a big, heavy car.
Yes, it's a very heavy car, a very big car, and it does a really nice job of even in spite of the fact that it has an automatic transmission.
Okay. Now we're going to, just for the benefit of people watching this, we have not got it running yet. We've started.
Right. Well, we had a problem with the gas tank. The gas tank has got rotten gas in it, like the other cars that we've looked at.
Right.
So we're going to have to get it out, clean it out, and put a new type of drain plug in it, and then fill it back up with gas. We know it runs because we put fuel directly in the carburetor, and it ran fine.
So the goal is we have rolled it out. We're looking it over, trying to get it running, and we're going to clean it up. And the goal is to do a little ride and drive episode with this thing. Yeah. So hopefully stay tuned, and we will be following up with all of that.
Yeah.
And more history.
Look forward to it.
All right, cool, man.
All right, that wraps up another little episode with the Roadmaster Woodie Wagon. Looking forward to doing more with that car. Have a great day.